Okay, so if your sound is poor quality, the hosts from the webinar have suggested that you log out and log in again. That's something you could try if you are having difficulties with your sound. Right, I think it's that time that we got started. So please do continue to ask your questions, and I will try and pick up as many of those as I can, either as we go through or towards the end of the presentation. There's also an option. I will see that you've asked a question. It flags up on the participants box, so hopefully I will get round to answering those as well. So thank you for joining this conference. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Elizabeth Harrin. I write the blog A Girl's Guide to Project Management, and I also coach project managers, as well as working as a project manager in the healthcare industry in the UK. And I'm often asked about the differences between the different qualifications that are available on the market, and that is what this webinar is going to cover today. We are going to cover a brief introduction to PMP, and then we're going to look at CAPM and Prince2 individually, and then we'll look at comparing those as well afterwards. So like I say, if you have got questions, please type them in the box. I'll try and answer as many as I can. So let's start with an overview of the different qualifications that we're looking at today. First, let's talk about PMP, Project Management Professional Qualification. As I'm sure many of you know, it's the premium qualification offered by PMI, which is the Project Management Institute. It's globally recognised, and in order to be able to apply for it, you need to have some level of experience as working as a project manager. So the prerequisites for taking that qualification, for making your application, are either a secondary degree, which is a high school diploma, an associate's degree, or the global equivalent, 7,500 hours of leading and directing projects, which sounds like quite a lot, and 35 hours of project management education, which equates to about a full-time working week of training courses, although you don't have to take them as a single block. Alternatively, if you don't meet those requirements, you can still apply for the PMP with a 4-year degree and only 4,500 hours of leading and directing projects, although you do still need that 35 hours of project management education in order to be able to, for your application to be considered by PMI. Now, the last data I've got for how many credential holders there are, it comes from the latest edition of PMI Today, which is the members newsletter, and that is 660,338. Quite a lot of people have got this kind of credential worldwide. CAPM, the Certified Associate in Project Management, is another PMI qualification, again globally recognised. It hasn't been around as long as some of the other qualifications, and globally the data again from the July edition of PMI Today says there's 28,500 certificate holders around the world. There are different prerequisites for this qualification. You don't have to have experience working as a project manager in order to put forward an application for the CAPM. That's a big difference. But you do need other prerequisites. So you've got two options. Firstly, you need to have either a secondary degree or 23 hours of project management education. That gets you round the work experience requirement. Or you can have that secondary degree and 1,500 hours of project experience. So you either drop the project management education requirement or you drop the work experience requirement. So it's slightly easier, there's slightly lower requirements for people to apply for that one. Right, I've had a request to speak more slowly, I'm sorry about that. I will try to do that, thank you for reminding me. The third qualification we're going to look at today is Prince2. That stands for Projects in Controlled Environments. And it's a method, so it steps you through the processes for managing a project. And because of that, a direct comparison with the credentials from PMI is difficult and actually probably quite unwise to do. They're not qualifications that you can it's not a qualification that you can easily compare with what PMI have to offer. However, it's a process-based method designed specifically for effective and efficient project management from beginning to end. Again, it's globally recognised. You don't need experience in order to be able to go ahead and take the course or take the exam. And it might help to explain here how the original version of Prince2 came about, perhaps something that you may be less familiar with than PMI qualifications. So the original version was created in 1989 by the Central Computer and Telecommunications Agency in the UK. So it was started as a way to specifically address the common causes of project failure, and it quickly became the UK standard project management methodology. It was popular, but it was soon considered too large, too unwieldy, too rigid, only appropriate for big projects. And as a result, they needed to do something differently. What we needed to do was to make sure it was more suitable for a wider variety of projects, and it's been updated several times since then. In fact, today we're using the 2009 version of Prince2, and this year they've also launched a Prince2 Agile credential. So the other major thing to understand about Prince2 is that actually it's a family of 3 qualifications: the Foundation, Practitioner, and Professional. Again, this is why a direct comparison with either CAPM or PMP is difficult. Prince2 Foundation is the basic certification level, and it covers basic Prince2 terminology and methodology. It's ideal for project managers, aspiring project managers, and staff members who play a key role, but it doesn't test how you can apply that knowledge. The next certification level is also designed for project managers and the project team, but it shows that the individual has sufficient knowledge of how to use and customize Prince2 in a real project environment. So that's the practitioner level. And from the Prince2 professional level, which is the highest level of certification, it tests your knowledge and ability across all the stages of the project lifecycle. So not everyone who works in project management or who is a Prince2 practitioner goes ahead and reaches this level, because it requires a 2.5-day assessment at a residential assessment centre. So statistics, again, very difficult to compare, because the Axelos, who are the owners of the product, are less transparent about publishing their data than PMI. They say that currently over 1 million Prince2 exams have been taken all across the globe. But you should also bear in mind, by looking at that number, that people can let their Prince2 registration expire. So the exams taken figure probably includes people who took the exam and then have not been registered. And we'll look at the ongoing requirements for making sure your credentials stays relevant for PMP, CAPM, and Prince2 later. There's another global project management accrediting body that we won't talk about today, but it's still worth knowing that it exists, and that is IPMA. That's the International Project Management Association, and it accredits national bodies. In the UK, it's the Association for Project Management, the APM. In the US, it's the American Society for the Advancement of Project Management, and in India, it's Project Management Associates. So it accredits local bodies. And at the end of 2014, according to their website, there are approximately 250,000 IPMA certificate holders worldwide, and they work on a competence-based, professionally assessed certification. It's a 4-level system. There's an awful lot about it, and a comparison of the IPMA qualifications against Prince2, CAPM, and PMP on their website. Their website is ipma.ch, but a discussion around that is out of scope of our webinar today. So let's look now at the differences between PMP and Prince2. So firstly, from a perspective of training, there's lots of different ways that you can take training, and it's something that you need to really look at your own personal learning style to think of what would be best for you. For PMP, lots of options are around, including self-study, classroom-based courses, online courses led by an instructor, online courses that are self-paced learning. Personally, I think that it's a good idea to look for a blend of multiple different learning styles or learning delivery mechanisms. So I think that would help you get a better understanding of your training material. And of course, you've got the option of working with your colleagues to create study groups. To look at the PMP exam, it's a 4-hour exam. It has 200 multiple choice questions. It's a computer-based exam, so you do have to go to a local exam centre in order to be able to deliver that, to be able to take that exam. Prince2 is slightly different. It's a classroom-based course is probably the most common way of doing it, but you can use online materials as well. You can self-study and just turn up for the Prince2 exam at the end. Again, that's something that is definitely possible, especially if you live a long way from the test centre, but it is something that is rare. There's a couple of questions that have come in that I'll address here. I've heard that in the PMP exam, 25 questions are test questions. Is this true? Yes, it is. They often put in, they do put in test questions. They are not assessed for your exam, but they are used to make the group of exam questions more broad and more wide, and so it's a way of making sure that they have constantly refreshed, up-to-date questions that are pitched at the right level, but they won't count towards your mark. And in this slide, I'm comparing a PMP with Prince2 Foundation and Practitioner. We won't be talking today about the professional option of the assessment centre. I think that's something that it's still quite a new option, and it's not a common option for most people. So this exam here, though, does relate to the Prince2 Practitioner exam. You've got, most people would opt to do, if you're going to do a classroom course, and most people in the UK, if I can talk from my local experience, opt to do a combined foundation and practitioner course in a classroom. It's an instructor-led course, and you take the foundation exam on Wednesday, and if you're successful, you can stay in the classroom for further study on Thursday and take the practitioner exam on the Friday. So there are also opportunities to do it on online learning and weekend courses as well. I took a weekend course once. So for the foundation exam, again, it's multiple choice. It's 75 questions on the paper, and there are 5 questions that are trial questions. There's 35 marks that are required to pass out of 70 available marks, so that's a 50% pass rate. The foundation exam is 60 minutes, and it's closed book, which means you can't take your manuals or notes into the exam, which is the same as for the PMP exam. For the Prince2 Practitioner exam, it's multiple choice, but it's a style of multiple choice called objective testing. So there are 8 questions with 10 question items per question, and it gets quite complicated. There's a long scenario to read, and they call the style objective testing. It's a 2.5-hour exam, but you don't get any extra reading time, and you need to take, there's 80 points available, and you need 44 marks or more to pass. So that's a pass mark of 55%. The difference with that one between PMP and the foundation exam is that you can take your official Prince2 manual into the exam as a reference. So the big difference there in what I've said is that the Prince2 exams are quite clear about their pass rate. PMI are more cagey about exactly what percentage is required to pass. They don't publish a pass mark, But commentators and training providers tend to agree that you need to be looking at routinely getting 75% in your practice exams in order to be sure of passing. Okay, so that's a bit of an overview between PMP and Prince2. Let's look at the framework and some of the other ongoing requirements for it. The PMP is based on the PMBOK Guide, Project Management Body of Knowledge, which is currently in the 5th edition. It's a standard that describes rules, processes and practices, but alone it won't tell you how to do a project. It's more of a collection of knowledge, guidelines and best practices. It's based on 5 process groups, so that they are initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. There are 10 knowledge areas covered in the book, covered in the PMBOK Guide, and they are integration management, scope management, time management, cost management, quality management, human resource management, communications management, risk management, procurement management, and stakeholder management. So Prince2 is a project management method. It helps you implement the knowledge practically, so you could actually use the PMBOK Guide and the Prince2 manual together. They are complementary. You don't have to limit yourself to using one or the other, because as well as a standard, you also need a method to be able to implement the project successfully. The framework for Prince2 is around 7 principles, 7 themes, and 7 processes. The 7 principles are continued business justification, that's all, and business case, learning from experience, defining your roles and responsibilities, managing by stages, managing by extension, focusing on products, manage by exception, sorry, focus on products, and tailoring to suit the project environment. The themes that underpin Prince2 are the business case, organisation, quality, plans, risk, change, and progress. And the processes, there are 7 processes in the model of Prince2. They cover starting up a project, initiating a project, managing a stage boundary, the transition between one phase and another, closing a project, controlling a stage, managing product delivery, and directing a project. So you can see that while they might use different words, actually there's a lot of common themes there around planning, quality, change, managing the work. So you will find that, after all, there are only so many ways you can manage a project. So you'll have to see a lot of common themes come through both of them. For both of them have ongoing requirements for the project manager. For PMP, you are required to get 60 professional development units every 3 years, and you have to submit those to prove that you're getting them. There's lots of ways to earn professional development units, so if you don't leave it to the last minute, then it really is not difficult to maintain your qualification. One thing to know there is that the PDU requirements are changing this year in December. So if you are looking to get your PMP, then you should look out for those changes coming into practice. And in fact, if your PMP certification expires on or after the 1st of December 2017, then it's a new PDU one that you need to be working towards. So that's going to affect everybody who is going for certification now, even if you might qualify before December when the new changes come into effect. It hasn't actually changed that much. You do still need to get 60 PDUs, but the way they're split and categorised is the main difference. The change has happened because PMI are aligning their continuous professional development requirements with the talent triangle that they've developed. So they've changed the categorisation to be more relevant to the 3 talent triangle areas, which are technical project management, leadership, and strategic business management. To maintain your qualification as a registered Prince2 practitioner, you have to re-register within 3 to 5 years of your original certification. So for the person, Kumar, who asked, is it possible to extend the certificate validity for a further 3 years? Yes, you can. You take your re-registration exam and you will re-register as a Prince2 practitioner for another 3 to 5 years. And you can continue doing that. The examination format for that, it's a 1-hour exam. It's 3 questions. There are 10 items per question. Again, it's a 55% pass mark, and you can take in your project management manual, your Prince2 manual, as long as it's the official side. So it's something you've got between 3 and 5 years to do that exam. Again, if you know it's coming, it is something that you can plan for. If you want to take a 1-day training course in order to refresh your skills, you can do that and then take the exam afterwards. Location-wise, both qualifications are known globally. PMP originated in the US. It's now known throughout the world. There are 274 PMI chapters and in 205 countries. So that gives you an indication of how widespread PMI membership is, although you don't need to be a member in order to take the certificate. Prince2, as we've seen, originated in the UK. It's known globally. It's particularly strong in Europe. It's particularly known for its use within government. That is the end of our comparison of Prince2 and PMP. We'll come back to some of those questions later on. And now I want to look at the differences between CAPM and Prince2. So let's have a quick look through those. I won't go over all of this again. CAPM training is offered in much the same way as PMP training. The main difference really is that it's a shorter exam. It's only 150 multiple choice questions. And we've covered the Prince2 training and the options for the exam earlier, so I won't cover that again now. The framework for CAPM is exactly the same as PMP, so you will be studying from the same material. The main difference is the depth of questions in the exam. CAPM will only test your knowledge of what is in the Pivot Guide. It's also not accredited in the same way. The PMP credential scheme is accredited by the American National Standards Institute, NC, against the International Organization for Standardization. So it's against ISO 17024. The Prince2 foundation exam has very similar goals in that it just tests the knowledge of concepts set out in the handbook. Foundation level aims to measure whether a candidate would be able to act as an informed member of the project management team using the Prince2 method within a project environment. And to this end, they have to be able to show that they understand the principles and the terminologies of the method, much as you would have to do with a CAPM exam. At a practitioner level, Prince2 practitioner tries to assess whether a candidate could actually apply the knowledge. So in that respect, it's testing something slightly different to the CAPM exam. And there are ongoing requirements, again, with that. You also have to retake your CAPM exam every 5 years. There's no requirement to take PDUs. You just sit the exam every 5 years. And with Prince2, as we've seen, you re-register between 3 and 5 years after your original certificate. Same location, background. So someone asked the question, why is the PMP exam so difficult to pass? And I'd have to say, I don't think it is. I think if you put the time and effort into studying and you understand the concepts within the book and you take practice exams and you understand that the Pivot Guide is not your only source of knowledge, and that you look also at things like the Code of Ethics, I think if you prepare for it, any exam is straightforward enough to pass. I do know that people find it difficult to do. Style of questions can be frustrating, and my best tip for you is to take lots of practice exams and to work with people who have done it and who understand how the questions are structured. You may well have complete knowledge of the book and still not perform well in an exam situation. So hopefully that answers that question. So those are the main differences between CAPM and Prince2. So now let's look at probably a big decision for many project managers is that they've decided that they are going to go with a PMI credential, and they've got the choice between PMP and CAPM. So let's look at whether or not the CAPM or PMP is potentially the right option. The training is the same, the exam is slightly different. I think we've covered those, you're probably clear about that. The framework that they're working on is the same. And the main the requirements for ongoing qualifications we've looked at those as well. So you've got the PDU requirements, PMP, which is the continuous professional development. The CAPM, you just do the exam. The main difference between these two qualifications from PMI is that the PMP is aimed at experienced project managers. You have to have, these come back to the prerequisites I mentioned earlier, you have to have some degree of managing projects before you can put forward an application to go for the PMP exam. So just to recap on that, to do the CAPM, you don't need to have the experience if you've got some training. So you can have your secondary degree, your high school diploma, your global equivalent and associate's degree, and 23 hours of project management education, which can be achieved through any formal route, as long as you can evidence that you've achieved that. Or you can skip the project management courses and apply if you can prove that you have 1,500 hours of project experience to go alongside your degree. The PMP does require you to have professional experience in managing projects, and you will have to evidence it on your application. So if you got it 15 years ago in a previous job, you need to be able to contact those people so that they can verify that you actually did it and act as sort of witnesses to your experience. And you're looking to prove that you've got your secondary degree and 7,500 hours of leading and directing projects, plus your 35 hours of project management training. Or you can, a higher level degree, a 4-year degree, with only 4,500 hours of leading and directing projects, with 35 hours of project management education. A question here about if you don't have managerial experience, which qualification should you go for, if indeed it's worth going for any qualification at all. If you don't have project management experience, then I think all of these qualifications will be tricky to achieve. PMP will not be possible because you will not be able to evidence that you have project management experience. The Prince2 exam will be difficult because it assumes there is some, well, you don't have to prove you have project management experience before you go into the classroom or before you sign up for an online course. You'll find the concepts make a lot more sense if you have worked in a project environment. CAPM doesn't require you to have project management experience, but you will have had to do some degree of training so that you've got some knowledge of what project management is all about before you go ahead. And frankly, if you've never worked on a project and you try to read a pinboard guide, I think you will struggle. In terms of whether you have to be a project manager, whether your managerial experience has to be in leading projects, I would say no. I would say you do not have to be a person in charge of the entire project in order to go for any of these qualifications. As long as you've had responsibility for project tasks, or perhaps a work stream, or in a test environment, having experience of managing the test phases of projects, you will probably find that you can justify your experience adequately to be able to go for any of these qualifications. So is it worth the impact? All study takes up time and it takes money in order to go ahead to study and give up your spare time to learn something new and then the stress of taking an exam. So let's look at we've gone through far, the implications on your job. There is some argument to say that qualification will help you in your career. So there's some data that's been put together from a company called Indeed, which says that project managers with PMPs earn 18% more than their peers. I mean, it's a really interesting figure, but I'm not sure that if I would get an 18% pay rise in my current job if I turned up one day and told my manager that I was now PMP. I think it's more likely that you'll see that increase over time and as a result of earning promotions based on your ability to do your job well and a credential that helps you understand the project environment, the context in which projects work, how to be better and deliver a more successful outcome. All of these will contribute to career success, which will then earn you the money. Perhaps you might need to change jobs in order to see any increase in salary. But I think statistically it's interesting to see that people with credentials tend to earn more. It's also an excellent negotiating chip when you come to have your annual appraisal. Any qualification that you have does show that you're dedicated to project management as a career and that you are prepared to improve your skills through study and through hard work. PMI did some research in 2013 and they produced a talent gap report which said there are going to be 4.5 million jobs created in project management by 2020. And that is really good news if you're wondering whether project management is a long-term profession and whether you will find work commensurate with the qualifications that you have then achieved. Now, I'm sceptical about a lot of surveys, but with this one I do actually agree with PMI. My own reading and research shows that the global economy is changing. We're moving towards more and more knowledge work and project-based work, and it makes sense that project managers will find more opportunities. And that's also the case for project managers who do not have the job title of project manager. And we're seeing more and more people who are managing projects within their job, but who are perhaps not given a title of project manager within their organisation. In that same study, PMI concluded that the project management industry is set to grow by $6.6 trillion by 2020. And I think what they mean by that is that there will be more project-based work. For me, it's another indication that companies are investing more in projects. Therefore, again, it's logical to conclude that they will need project managers, either people who have the job title of project manager, project coordinator, project leader, or people who simply have the skills and experience to be able to lead projects as part of their day job in a different area. So the additional jobs created, the additional investment in project management assume that you don't really need a credential. But if you want to compete with people who do those jobs, then it does make a sense to get a qualification that's relevant to your career stage, your industry, and location. It is perfectly possible to have a successful project management career without qualifications, but taking the time to earn and achieve a certificate offers you, I think, a number of worthwhile benefits. It helps you be equipped, and it will normally help you improve your speed, efficiency. It should get you more positive outcomes at work. It will save your employer time and money, which is a good thing, because you will be more efficient. If you can prove that, it might end up in a promotion for you. For me, personally, I manage a lot of IT projects. I manage mainly healthcare. I used to work in financial services. I used to work in financial services technology projects. The biggest difference it made to me is to increase my confidence and competence. So if you are more confident in your ability, you will much more likely be a success. But obviously, that might not have the same effect for you. I'm just speaking personally. But I think every time you complete a project, you're learning more. And the more confidence you have, and if qualifications help you achieve that level of confidence, you will generally be better at your job. Finally, if you find yourself in the market for a new job, having a certificate will improve your marketability. It will put your name up there. It makes you able to play with the other candidates on a level playing field, and it may well help you learn the job faster. Equally, it might help you keep your job longer if your company goes through an exercise where some people leave or they're made redundant, and then looking at all the people and trying to keep their top talent. Okay, I'll just pick up a couple of other questions that have come in. One question here, I've heard that Prince2 is easier than PMP and it is of less value than PMP. Is that true? In my experience, I would say Prince2 as an exam is easier than PMP. I would say value is a subjective thing, and value is what it is to the people who are assessing it. In the UK, Prince2 is a de facto standard. You will not find many project managers who expect to go far in their career without it. However, you'll also find a small proportion of people with PMP, and that is valued by their employer. So you need to decide what value means to you and your employer and your industry. And to do that, I would recommend you look at job adverts in your area or in the area that you want to work, and look at what they're asking for. Because if nobody is asking for Prince2, then it's not worth your while to take that qualification. If everybody is asking for CAPM, then that's probably, if you want the job, that's probably the qualification that you should go for. However, I do not think it's possible to say that one qualification has more value than another, because it is so much dependent on what your employer wants and whether you want to learn from standard or whether you want to learn method. So that's, I know it hasn't answered, I haven't given you a definitive answer, but it's the truth. Why is PMP exams so difficult to pass? I've answered that one. Comparison to Prince2. I would actually say the Prince2 questions are harder. The Prince2 exam style is a scenario-based exam. There's an awful lot of reading to do. They are objective testing questions which feel like they're designed to trick you. Multiple questions with multiple options. It's not at all the same structure of exam as PMP. So I would say if you study well, you can get through either of them. Exam practice is the key. Does Prince2 and PMP, do they complement each other? Do you have to choose? You do not have to choose between them. I would still say this comes back to what you would find valuable in your job. For me, there isn't really any option, there isn't really any value in taking qualifications that are not going to help you in your career. So you need to consider how your company works. Does your company use Prince2 methodology, or does it follow a bespoke methodology, or does it follow a PMP approach? You can look at that by asking questions. You can consider the qualifications that your peers have, and if you are looking to make a decision about what qualification you want to put all your project managers through, if you are immature in your project management organisation and you haven't taken this decision yet, then it's worth looking at both standards and assessing them against what you want to do. Because it's impossible to say that for your company, in your environment, this is the best option, because there are there's even more options than what we discussed here today, because there's the IPMA qualifications as well, and there are other organisations who offer, there are other certificates that you can get. So I think look at the industry, look at the case. I will come back. I see that there's more questions coming in. I will come back and answer those in a second. Just a couple more points that I wanted to make. As you know, this webinar is sponsored by Simplilearn, and I have now a word from our sponsor. They are a training provider and examination centre. They're accredited and approved and recognised by globally known names like PMI and Prince2, APMG, CFA Institute, GARP, ASTQB, IIBA, and some others as well. They are trusted by Fortune 500 companies as a learning provider for career growth and training, and they've trained over 4,000 professionals worldwide. They do have PMP and Prince2 certification training in the classroom and online learning models. CAPM training is available online, and they also have an all-in-one project management course package, which includes those 3 courses and some other ones, and that starts at $99. So it's worth looking around at the different training options that you've got available to you, either online if that suits your location better, or locally. The bottom line really is that ask this question a lot: what qualification can I take? And on this webinar, I find it difficult to give you personalised advice, as there's so many of you. But the bottom line is, you need to think about what you want from your career, and you need to think about what your employer or your future employer is going to expect you to have for you to do some research of your own. I'll go through now and look at some of the other questions that have come in. Hopefully I'll get round to answering those. Can you use 2 weeks to prepare for the PMP exam? I would not recommend it. You probably could if you had 2 solid weeks to prepare and it was all you wanted to do during those weeks, then I would not put it past you. If you are dedicated, you would probably manage. I would say, however, there is an awful lot of material, and if you are approaching the Pinbot Guide for the very first time, yeah, give yourself longer. As there's a question here about when you're not experienced in project management, how will CAPM help you? It will help you be able to organise your work more effectively, and it will help you do the projects that you are working on. If you don't have the experience, it might help you get a job where you can get some experience. Will you be able to take PMP later when you've got some experience? Yes, of course you can. Taking any of these qualifications does not mean that you are shutting doors for the future. You can take none of them or all of them all at the same time or over the period of several years, and your career goals will change. So you may well start off with Prince2 Foundation or CAPM, something similar, and move on when you have more experience to Prince2 practitioner or professional or to PMP. Have a look here, see if there's any other questions. Somebody just asked about Agile. So there are Agile project management certificates as well, we haven't talked about today. I would have to say that the language of both Pinbot Guide and the Prince2 Handbook don't lend themselves to Agile. Prince2 has brought out an Agile credential, an Agile certificate this year, which addresses that gap and aligns some of the Agile vocabulary with the Prince2 method. I would say you can still work in an Agile environment and use Pinbot approaches. Agile doesn't mean you don't do any other project management. You will still need to be able to apply a level of rigor and project management to your Agile software development or your Agile, whatever it is, development that you are doing. If you work in a purely Agile environment and you're working with IT, you might want to consider whether PMP is really the right thing for you to do first. There might be other more relevant qualifications that suit your environment better. However, PMP is certainly complementary. There's a lot in there that would help. And the same with either Prince2 or Prince2 Agile, you would find useful processes and standard approaches to getting work done that will help you in an Agile environment. In order to pass the PMP exam, how many questions does one have to answer correctly? There is no published benchmark on that. My advice would be you need to be taking practice exams and getting 75% in order to give yourself confidence that you can clear the exam. Let's have a look at some of these. How will your prior PM experience be validated if you are not currently working? That's fine. As long as you can prove that you have had the experience, you will be able to register for the PMP exam. The question there is, can you prove it? So that might need to come from testimonials from your previous employer, references. You can use project management education from many years ago, several years ago, as long as you can prove it. So it's probably worth getting a handbook or the application form and going through the prerequisites and having a look to see whether or not you could evidence, based on what you can prove and the people you are still in contact with, to see whether or not you can meet those requirements. Is there negative marking in the PMP exam? I don't believe so. I've highlighted already the exam differences between Prince2 Foundation and Practitioner. Do international development organisations discriminate between PMP or Prince2 individuals during hiring? That's not a question that I don't know is the answer. I can't imagine that international development organisations as a block would discriminate between PMP or Prince2. I would imagine some might prefer one, some might prefer others. I know that's probably not the answer that you were hoping for, but unfortunately it's impossible to say for oil and gas do Prince2, so healthcare do PMP. It just is truly not that simple. And my best advice to you is to research the companies, the industry that you want to work in, local to your country, because again there are country-specific differences. So for example, in a UK government job, if I wanted to work in civil service in the UK, I would be expected to get Prince2. I would find it very difficult to work without that. However, for a US government job, that's certainly not the case. In fact, for a US government job, I would be saying, look at something that gives you background in earned value, because a lot of government contracts rely on you being able to demonstrate your earned value skills there. Let's have a look and see if there's any others. Is there always a requirement of contact hours? How do you gain those if you decide to do self-study? You can choose to self-study with materials that have been prepared by registered education providers. PMI has a list of people they accredit, and you can download certificates generally. You go through an online program or you will use their materials. They will give you a test and then they will give you a certificate. They self-study alone will not qualify you for your 35 hours of contact for your PMP certification. So you need to have that. It needs to be 35 hours of formal project management education. You don't have to do that in a classroom, but just reading a PMBOK guide doesn't count. You can't use that as your 35 hours, or towards your 35 hours of formal project management education. It needs to be done with a recognised training provider. Okay, I think that's, we're approaching our time. I think I've answered the majority of questions that I can see there. I'd just like to say thank you very much for coming along to this webinar, and thank you to Simplilearn for hosting it. I appreciate all the questions. It's been quite hard to keep up with them as they've been coming in at a pace, but I hope I've managed to get through a lot of them today. And if I can, I will try to answer any others of them on my blog in the weeks to come. So thank you very much for your participation today in this webinar, and I hope you managed to answer some of your questions around the certifications available to you as a project manager.